All right, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to yet another lovely episode of the Gear Corner. So, today I figured we would have a nice, intimate chat. Actually, we're going to do what I'm going to consider to be my opus. This is the Build Your Own Clone, BYOC effects, the Crown Jewel kit. As you can see, it's sealed. I have not opened it. I wanted us to go through this together, just so you can see the different variations of how pedal kits can come. Yeah, full disclosure, I tried building one about almost 4 years ago now, and I broke the diode, and it's like a germanium diode. I didn't have any extras, so I just kind of set it aside, and then ordered some diodes, and then they finally came in, and I did that, and I jumped ahead on the instructions, and I thought, okay, I got this, no problem, and it was a problem. It ended up not being able to fit the circuit board inside of the chassis because I had already soldered all the potentiometers together, and that's kind of where I learned my method of putting the potentiometers in the chassis and then putting the board onto and soldering them that way so that everything fits. Nevertheless, there's a lot of parts. There's a lot of parts to this kit. So I've already taken the liberty of printing out the instructions because I know for a fact I'm going to be using the instructions. Your first page is your warranty. Second page is also your warranty, but it's also telling you where you can go to get support if you need it. Troubleshooting, your table of contents, boom. And what I love is, one of the things I love, here's a picture of what the circuit is going to look like once we are done building it. So you have quite legitimate version of something to look at, to go, is that right? Oh, I don't know. Maybe that's wrong. Maybe. So I'm a big fan of this, and so much to the tune that I'm going to keep this out for reference so I can look at it from time to time and be like, I don't know, is that correct? Good stuff, good times and good things. So the first order of business, most important part after opening up our kit, is to do the checklist, and the checklist is set apart in resistors, showing you how many and what values, and then how to identify them if you need it. Your resistor codes, link at least, set of capacitors, may say this on the body, cap codes, your diodes, your integrated circuit chips. Transistors, relays, potentiometers, and all the other hardware. This is all going into one pedal. Yeah, that's a hell of a checklist. And then it starts. Step one is adding the resistors. Beautifully mapped out, detailed. And the majority of anytime we're adding new components, diodes, resistors, transistors, etc., relays, it has a map like this. So very happy about that. Gonna stick to the instructions this time. I swear to God. So we're gonna do the checklist first. And we'll see if I need to measure anything, because I really do not want to go through and say red, black, brown, or red, brown. I'd rather just multimeter it. We shall see. All right, next we are going to unbox, or in this case, unbag. Alright, looks like that is 100% correct. It is one bag with all the parts. Right. Yeah, build your own clone. What batch it's from. Alright, that's good. What I am happy about is that it looks like all of the capacitors and LEDs and let's see, resistors. And it looks like everything's going to be, even our IC chips and our sockets. Looks like that is in a separate pink bag. First, before I dump all that out, this is what the pedal looks like. It's going to be wickedly epic. So if I remember correctly, obviously you have your switches and your LEDs, as far as foot switches and LEDs, and I believe there's a toggle switch that goes here, and then toggle switches that go here. And you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 potentiometers. Essentially, it has all the different types of clipping diodes. So silicon, germanium, LED, and you can switch and mix match and make all kinds of crazy stuff happen with this box. From what I understand, it's basically the creme de la creme, or the crown jewel. So that'll be fun. Ah, yeah, baby. Made in China. Alright, we'll set that aside for the moment. And first comes first. Alright, we have what looks to be a daughter board with capacitors, resistors, and bridges. Okay. And we have what looks to be the main. 1, 2, 3, 4 integrated circuit chip sockets, 4 circuits. We've got capacitors and more capacitors and diodes and more capacitors and resistors and LEDs and all the things. And it looks like I'm going to have to multimeter all the resistors. But the good news is see how they're, you have this like grouping, this taping together. So that's good. If it says that there's like 5 of one thing, grab that and set it aside. That'll make it relatively easier. So I guess we'll do that next. Oh my good lord. Look at that beauty right there. Boom. That is our pretty. That is our pretty. And I love that it's all labeled. I really do. Like, I love that it's all labeled. That's a big ass board though. There's going to be a lot of components. A lot of components. Looks like we have a yellow power jack. And it looks like they defaulted with black knobs, which is cool. Not necessarily saying they're all going to stay, but whatever. There's even some LEDs in here floating around. God. Alright, that tells me that this is going to be mostly just the hardware bag, whereas this, the LEDs that are in here are going to be for actual clipping stage. And we should be able to tell on our board. Let's get that out of the way. Well, actually, let's Let's do that. See how that works. There we go. Cover the lettering. Should be in focus. Yeah, we've got charge pump, relay. Yep, germanium. There's your germanium diodes right there. Negative, negative, or cathode and anode. On, off, on, off, on. So those are toggle switches. On. Okay, so it's going to be 4 toggle switches right there. It's going to be right here. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that means this, of course, will be like that. That's insane. Looks like there's only going to be enough room for the 2 switches, the 2 foot switches, to lay right here and right here. The rest of it's going to be taken up by a board. So this thing's going to be cram-packed full of everything. Awesome. Okay, so where we've made it to so far is going on to the second page of the checklist and getting the hardware taken care of. So we've got our potentiometers and everything's been checked. Everything is correct. We've got our double pull, double throw, triple pull, double throw, on, off, on switches, all the good goods. And the input jack and output jack, the power, the 2 LEDs for the indicators that they're on. Just everything that's going to be after we've populated the printed circuit board and, you know, started getting everything else taken care of to finish up. Taped off and set aside. We've got some breakout, or we've got some wire up, or wiring, whatever you want to call it. We've got the back plate, and what I like to do is I like to take anything that's for the back plate. In this case, it's the screws and the little rubber feet, and just painter's tape it to the plate. Put the board over there for just a moment, because now the good part is verifying that we have all the capacitors and resistors and integrated circuit chips and diodes and everything else that I'm not thinking about. Yeah, so again, I've stated most of this is actually already taped together, so however many you have, that's a good thing. I think it's a sign. It's a good sign, at least. But you never, ever really know until the moment of truth. So this is the part where I'm going to go through for the resistors first and just measure to make sure I knock out which ones are what, put them on the paper, and inventory list, essentially. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I've shown it on the first video that we did, the Fred pedal build, but I will show you the final list once I've calculated everything. Okay, we've gotten to the point where I've gotten all of the components taken care of, except for the last few of the resistors, and they are taped off, but they're like, I have 4 different values that are taped in pairs of 2. And so this is just a brief overview again. If you don't remember or haven't seen the other video, essentially take your multimeter, turn it to omega for resistance, and I hit select so that it's auto. You see the little omega sign right there. and take your negative and positive. Negative on one side, positive on the other. 1.007. 3.3. 2.2 or 220, excuse me, and 0.47. Yeah, okay. Cool. So go ahead and catch you up. This is the component sheet where it stands. We have our transistors and our diodes, our capacitors. As you can see, there's all 4 types of capacitors, and then our resistors, and this will be filled with these guys, and then we'll be able to start building. All right, now that we have our components, transistors, diodes, capacitors, and resistors in their entirety, and we've gone through our checklists, and I do say plural because, as you can see, it starts here. All of our resistors, all of our capacitors, our diodes, our integrated circuit chips are right here, and we do have one additional socket and resistor, or socket and integrated circuit chip that I'm not seeing on the list, but I could be missing something. I must be missing something. I don't know why. And our transistors and relays. Those are our relays right there. There's 2 of them. I've already snapped the tabs off of the pots that had them. Here are the labels and values for what those potentiometers are. All the hardware. 4 rubber bumpers. I'm not entirely sure what that is. I have one last packet to go through, but it's not anything to do on this checklist, so I don't know. We'll see. That must be where the other integrated circuit chip goes, or something of that nature. But the great news is our next step is step 1, where we put in all of our resistors into the board. So happy days. All right, so before we start any of the attachments, attaching any of the resistors and all that, I like to take a lens wipe and clean off the board just from finger oils and parts touching it and things of that nature, just in case. Like, you never know. It looks clean already, but I like to just make sure. And this is alcohol based, so it'll do everything I need it to do. There we go. And the other side. There we go. Looks good, looks good. This is going to be the side that is up into the chassis. This is going to be the side that is exposed when we open up the back plate and all of that. And this is the side that we're going to focus on because you can see all of the values of everything. Right. All right, we're going to let that dry off for just a second, and then we'll start populating the circuit board. I'm just going to go ahead and cut, and we'll get back to once the resistors are all done and move on to the next step. And we have the resistors in place. And we can see there's quite a bit of them. It doesn't look as neat just yet because of the nightmare fuel, which is all of the shit on the back that you still have to solder. So yeah, this I can honestly tell you, if you're in a rush, if you're in a hurry, or you want to get this done in like one session, this is the wrong pedal kit to build. Just throwing that out there. For example, I've already been working on these processes, taking my time, yes, but I've been working on the processes for this kit for about 2.5, 3 hours now, and I've just accomplished step 1 of the. You can see the red squares and the black hash marks through them. Those are the diodes. Or, excuse me, those are the resistors. So this is step 1, and then now I have to solder everything, and then we'll move to step 2. And now the cool thing is, if I look at my component sheet, you still see the whole top row of transistors and diodes, and the second row of capacitors are still there. So there's still plenty to do, but the entire bottom row is completely done, and that is 33, 35, 37 components. So I've already applied 37 components into this bad boy. So that's something. I mean, it's not life-changing, but it's something. Anyways, we're going to do the soldering and the clipping of the legs, and then we will move on to step 2. All right, we're on to step 3 now. Step 2 was simply just adding the header sockets, and that is 1 and 2 header sockets. Everything else, as you can see, is resistors, and everything's soldered in and cleaned up. Looks pretty good, actually. But we still have a long way to go, and I do mean long way to go. So the next step is the diodes, and the reason why I'm bringing this back in at this moment is because, one, I love the fact that each of the types of diodes are color-coded, but also the important information is right here, saying that being sure to match the end of the diode with the strip to the layout on the PCB. The striped end should go in the square solder pad. Pretty awesome. And then it tells you the diode highlighted in red is the black-bodied 1N4001. Diodes in purple are the 1N5817s. The diodes in green, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right there, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are the 1N914s or 1N4148s. The diode highlighted in blue right there is the 4.3 volt Zener diode, and the diodes highlighted in yellow right there are the germaniums. So there you go. We're gonna knock those out, put them in, solder them up, and come back. Okay, I thought I would go ahead and take this opportunity to give you a solid piece of advice when it comes to diodes, especially the the ones that are glass bodied, like these. They're very small. I mean, they're very small. Like these guys right here. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These are germaniums, and they're the biggest diodes that we have. They're very similar to these guys here in size. These guys are tiny. They're the same size as these capacitors. The problem is that they are glass. And so you do not, and I mean do not, use anything like this, like you normally would, for real. Even if you're just pulling the paper off, hold the leg and take your time. And then when you go to bend, don't even hold the glass. Just bend and bend like that. See? Super, super important. I mean, I'm telling you, it's super important. I don't know how I can possibly stress it any further. Don't do it. Just don't do it, because you're going to have to pay attention to the polarity, and that little bitty stripe is next to nothing. Now see, like how I bent it and it's sticking up quite a ways, right? Some people might think, oh cool, we'll just push it down. No, don't push it down. I'm telling you, don't do it. Pull on the legs from underneath. It is going to be easier on you, trust. And barely assist from the top. And I mean barely. Barely assist from the top. And that way you can get it well seated, just like that. See that right there? Well seated, no breaky, and good to go for soldering. All right. When we come back, we'll move on to step 4. All right, steps 4, 5, and 6 have to do with our integrated circuit chips right here, right? Integrated circuit chips, the sockets, the relays, and the 2 red LEDs. Now, these are the clipping LEDs, right? These guys right here, right there. Boop, 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 boop. Yes, so integrated circuit chip sockets go in first, then the circuit chips go in, then we'll do the relays, then we'll do the LEDs, and we'll come back after that. It's important to remember at this point that the integrated circuit chips right here and the sockets here, the sockets have this little notch at the top. I do mean the top, meaning that this is post 1. That's the top, that's the top, this is the top, this is the top. And then with the integrated circuit chips themselves, you'll see this little bitty circle right there, 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 and there. That's how you identify post 1 and the cutout, post 1 cutout. This is the top, and the top, and the top, and the top, 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 top. Pretty easy to remember. Just matchy. What I do love about a good pedal board manufacturer is that they will have the orientation on the board. And I am currently trying to find, there we go. Like this one says charge pump right there. Yep, charge pump. You can see the circle, or the little cutout right here, which means the circle will go here. The TL072, you can see it right there. Notch there. 1 has the square. 1 has the square. You kind of get a point as 4, 5, 5, 8, notch, square. So top and 1. Once you do it a few times, it's pretty easy to remember, but you can even see like on the relays, you'll see the notch here and the 1 here. And that's interesting to me because currently I haven't looked at the relays, but I don't see anything indicating a notch. So my hope is that this line right here is the indicator. But we'll get to that in a minute, and I'll verify that. Remember, notch is the top for the socket. Circle is number 1. So that's okay. I think it's worth noting while I'm doing these integrated circuit chips and sockets. It's worth noting that a couple of these, so 2 of these were relatively easy to identify based off of one of them actually has the name on the chip, and it also corresponds with the circuit board, the printed circuit board. Same with this guy. These two have their names on the chips, so they're easy to identify. This one here with the charge pump, uh, the instructions say 1054, but the chip says something completely different. So I actually had to Google the chips to get the data sheets. And I was able, in doing so, I was able to identify which one's the charge pump, this guy here. And I didn't know what this says on, I mean, it says it on the chip. It also says it on the instructions. It says MCU, Mike Charlie uniform. And I was like, what is MCU? Well, it's a microcontroller unit. If you look on the chip, it has nothing about an MCU. I mean, I now see this little symbol, the M, but I mean, I can't guarantee that that's what that means. So I had to Google it as well, and I Googled the 12F609, the actual model for the chip, 12F609. And that's how I found out it's a microcontroller unit, programming chip. So that's yay. But I'm telling you, man, this is some shit that can get you very, very lost very, very quickly, or it can make you mess it up, or it can get you frustrated and make you just want to toss the whole thing in the garbage can. Like, it can be very tedious and it sucks. So things to think about when you're wanting to potentially purchase a kit like this. You know, you're not always going to have everything spelled out for you in the instructions, and that can be very very frustrating, to say the least. It can be very concerning. It can be very off-putting. It can be very debilitating, for lack of a better term. But okay, so where we are at now is having our transistors in place, 7, in the correct orientation. We now move on to step 9, which is adding the film and ceramic disc capacitors. These are non-polarized, so they can go either way. I like putting them where you can read the values, the names, whatever the case may be, from whatever angle you're looking at. And then it just says that the ceramic disc capacitors are highlighted in yellow and are also non-polarized. These are the yellow right there, 1, 2, and 3. And then the red are going to be the film capacitors, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. And then we have insert the capacitors highlighted in green on the underbelly of the PCB, 1 and 2. Now, this leads me to what I was talking about earlier at the LEDs. Those are supposed to be, this is the underbelly, come to find out. So I had these proper, then I took them out and put them here because of the picture that it shows me what it should look like. The saving grace is that you still pay attention to the orientation on the PCB. So like the long leg was in the square post. So there you go. Same thing happened with the transistor. It was saying this should be at the underbelly of the PCB and the rounded part should be towards the LEDs. Well, it also stated finally in the instructions that if it goes on the top, to follow the orientation on the screen print. So that's what I'm doing. I'm keeping everything on the top. I don't want to have anything on the underbelly. I just don't. I don't really care. As long as it works, it works. But as the picture shows that they said, like I've got it hanging up right here with some painter's tape. And as you can see, it tells you to do, the instructions tell you to put the LEDs on the underbelly of the board. Well, they're right here on the picture. And it tells you to put the transistor on the underbelly of the board and rounded side against the LEDs, or you can put it on top and have the flat side against the LEDs. just like the picture. So that's exactly what we did. You know, that's just how I'm feeling it. Now, on this here, it's telling you that the 473 and 105 capacitors are going on the underbelly. But if you look right there, what is that? On top and on top. So they are going on top because, quite honestly, I'm tired of getting confused by convoluted instructions. And if it doesn't work, well, then that's on me, partially, but it would also be partially on the build your own clone electronics or effects or whatever website, because of these instructions that show the picture saying this is what your kit should look like when it's complete. Your kit may come with different colored capacitors, switches, etc. Don't be alarmed by this. They still do the exact same thing. Okay, well, we're going based on how that looks. All right, so where we are currently at is we have all of our film capacitors, our ceramic capacitors, the little Advil looking guys right there, the film, and these box capacitors are they were in the kit. They didn't match up to the parts list, but they had the correct amount of parts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of the big guys, and 1, 2, 3, 4 of the little guys, and that ended up being part of the different parts that still have the same. Oops, upside down. They still have the same value. They still have the same process. They still have the same effect. So that's, I guess, those were substitutions instead of massive of these wax covered guys. We got the box instead. But hey, I'm not complaining. We are knocking this thing out of the park. We're almost completely finished with all of our components because the last piece, they're still capacitors, but they are the electrolytic capacitors. There's only 9 of them. And once those are done, I believe we are able to move forward with the potentiometers and this little daughter board. And then we'll be almost finished. I'm excited. Okay, moving on. All right, so this is what our populated circuit board looks like. As far as the components go, everything's done. As far as the, I guess I should say the diodes, the capacitors, the integrated circuit chips, the relays, those components are done. And now the instructions tell me to move on to the hardware that goes into the chassis. So we're going to do that. Right. It is like Christmas has come early. We are assembling the enclosure. So I've already put the cables to the steps 1 and 2, essentially. Step 1 is cutting 4 3-inch wires and attaching them, soldering them to the switches, which we have already done. And then I've already placed them inside step 2, placed them inside the enclosure, and they are silent switches, so I'm very happy about that. I also kept them very close to the chassis, so don't have to worry about anything potentially breaking. Plus, it gives more room to slide the board in and all that other stuff, but who knows, I might have to move them up further. The next step is actually telling us that it is time for the potentiometers. I'm excited. They say make sure you don't solder anything at all. They said you can go ahead and solder the middle lug of each of the potentiometers, as that will help when we go to put them into the enclosure. So I don't know, but anyways, the potentiometers are going to go into this side, and I'm pretty positive I will go ahead and do the independent, like the middle lug of each of the components, just to have that good to go. Cool. So be right back. Okay, so where we are now is that was probably the biggest bitch I've had to deal with. getting the components in. This is where I lost hope last time when I tried to do this before, and it was not awesome. I don't suggest it at all. It blows. I'm not a fan, but it's done. So now I'm just clipping the LEDs, recognizing for the indicators. There we go. The point in which the instructions have already told me to go ahead, get everything together, tighten the nuts, solder, and we are there. So this is where we are at. Everything works as far as I didn't break anything yet. All the potentiometers are snug. The LEDs are in place. So now I've got to put the input jack, or excuse me, I need to put the foot switches back in. And then I have to put the input and output jacks, which is the point in where I'm at on the instructions, and then the power, and then that, in theory, will be it. So we'll see. We shall see. I'm excited though. All right, so we are in step 7 of everything. All the potentiometers are wired or soldered. Same with the switches. Yeah, all the potentiometers and the switches are soldered to the board and complete. There you go. We've got the LEDs and the foot switches just got soldered in right here, and they're having me solder into the board. So I believe the next step is going to be the, let's see, that's the input. So input and output jack and the DC adapter. And I believe, yeah, that looks to be it, but we'll see. Let's get it done. All right, so now that everything's wired up, input jack, output jack, power supply, and the foot switches. The only thing left is this little pink bag, and apparently that is a linear power booster, LPB, and it'll go right there in those two sockets. We'll find out. Anyways, I'm going to put this linear power booster together, snap it into place, and fire her up, and we'll see what happens. Okay, so to troubleshoot this linear power boost module, how I broke the legs, that's what I was telling you. Essentially, I broke the legs, the header socket snapped from the legs. The legs were soldered into the board. I pushed down to manipulate for the jack. I think that's the boost jack anyways, which is ironic. And it ended up snapping. So what I did was I removed it and cut 4 1-inch cables, purple cables, and soldered them to the PCB where the legs were for the header socket, and then wired those 4 going directly to where they correlate from the board to the daughter board for the linear power boost module, and then the other 4 are still on the header socket that came with, which I believe you can see right in there. It's kind of difficult to see, but nevertheless, yeah, so as far as the instructions go, they didn't even have anything for the power booster or the linear power boost module. They didn't have anything. So multimeter knocked those 4 out, resistors to get the measurements, and then 1 transistor and 2 of the capacitors. And that's it. So in theory, she's done. I really hope she works. Tonight or tomorrow, deep dive into the tones of this bad boy, just like I did with the previous videos. Okay. Well, yeah, here we go. All right, great news. We we being me, got it to work. I had some issues that I had to troubleshoot. I had put it together, and I had tested the power socket right here was wired up. Everything was wired up, but the input and output jacks and the foot switches were still out of the chassis. And I plugged in the power and turned on each of the jacks and the LEDs on the other side on the faceplate. These guys were indicating that the circuits were on, they were active, everything was working just fine. I go and put in the mentioned black parts, input, output, and foot switches, and put the back plate on and everything else, and I was super excited, plugged it in, and there was nothing. Now I did plug in the input and output jacks and tested it, and there was a through signal, so the clean guitar or anything going into this or anything coming out of this was still running. There were no problems there, which led me to believe that something was grounding out and not activating the actual circuit, the board, all of this shit. So, yeah, I called it a day. I was exhausted. I put 8 hours into this fucking thing. And the best thing that I've learned is one of the hardest things for me, but I learned that if you just step back, take a breath, or take a day, or sleep on it, whatever the case may be, you'll be okay, and you'll figure it out. And I did. I poured a cup of coffee, and then opened up the back, tested it again, nothing happened, brought out the input and output jack and the 2 foot switches, plugged in the power just to check, and sure enough, it lit up. So that tells me that one of those 4 components were grounding out. Well, at first I thought it was the foot switches touching the circuit board because everything is beyond crammed in here. But that was not the case. What ended up being the case was on these specific lugs, you'll see this little tab back here now. This guy right there that comes up and has that little hole, that used to be flat like this on both of these. And the problem is, and that guy right there was touching on that solder joint. These two right here, 1 and 2. And I believe what was happening was it was just completing the circuit, but not allowing all of this circuitry to actually work. That's the best assumption I can have, or that I came up with. But the good news is, as soon as I bent those 90 degrees upward, we have power to both. So I'm going to put the knobs back on and plug it in, and I'm going to make the audio for it, and I'll add that to this video. So thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate it. Make sure you like, subscribe, share, all the other YouTube algorithm crap that I'm supposed to tell you. And this is a build your own clone effects kit, and it's called the Crown Jewel. But because of that one moment that I had a little bit of a shitty whatever, I'm now calling this the Pretty Little Dumpster Fire. So there that is. And yes, I made this kit my bitch. All right. I love you guys. Until next time, I have been your curmudgeonous pedal builder novice trying to do something that is stressless, and this one was not stressless, but I'm glad it works. And so you guys are about to hear all the tones. All right. Thanks for tuning in.
All right, party people, let's do this. We've got our clean tone. All right, let's start with 9 volt soft clipping silicon, hard clipping silicon, and the mid Q in the medium openness. Now, if we take the boost and put it after the circuit, then we can make that go much louder. If we boost the gain to 3 o'clock. If we turn the volume of the guitar down to 10%. Splitting the position between bridge and neck. Splitting the bridge pickup down to single coil and still in split position. Full bridge. Move to silicon on the soft and germanium on the hard. Engage the boost again. Now let's take our mid frequency and sweep. Turn our tone down. Dial back the mids just a little bit. Very brittle. Take the gain down to 12 noon. Let's move the mid Q to fully or wide. It's more my style. All right, now let's sweep that mid. Turn the bass up a little bit, turn the treble up a little bit, turn the mids up a little bit. Let's go ahead and crank the gain again to 3 o'clock. What if we turn the soft clipping off, so no silicone and no LED? Oh, daddy likey. All right, I turned up the presence just a little bit, and I turned up the bass just a little bit. Back off the tone. What if we move this into 18 volts? Oh, more headroom, yes. All right, so just the drive. All right, that's how that sounds with the germanium and germanium in the hard clipping and no soft. Now, if we turn off the hard clipping as well, lots of loud. All right, I'm going to back off the bass. Back off the volume of the gain circuit. We're going to sweep the mid frequency just a little bit. All right, so we're still in 18 volt mode. We've got no soft and no hard clipping right now. They're both turned off, so nice and loud. The mid Q is wide. Bass, mid, and treble are all in the 12 to 2 o'clock range. And then if we put the boost in front of that circuit and gain it all the way, or volume all the way. I've backed the boost off to 2 o'clock, and now I'm going to add a little more drive for the drive circuit. All right, now we're going to give, the presence is good. The presence is at 4 o'clock. That's, I mean, we really don't need much else. I'm going to mid-frequency sweep again. Add a little more treble. Turn the boost off. And this is a linear power boost. It's the boost module. So if you're not familiar with the crown jewel, or as I'm calling my pedal build, this one right here is called the Pretty Little Dumpster Fire. If you're not familiar with it, that's totally fine. It's understandable. There's a company that buildyourown.clone.com apparently about 2 months ago, they closed down shop. So if you can find a kit, it's going to be from some third party, whatever the case may be. You're not going to be able to buy them from the BYOC electronics anymore. Apparently they closed shop. I don't know why, but nevertheless, there's a lot of versatility in this pedal, but it's going to be easy to get a sound that you don't like. In my opinion, it's also easy to get tones that you do like, and I like multiple tones in this pedal. Now, that being said, it depends on your situation. If you're running this into an emulated amplifier, if you're running it into an actual tube amplifier, if you're running it into the effects loop of the amplifier to take over all of the preamp, if you're going to be boosting into more drives, if you've got compression in front of it, if you've got compression after it, if you're running it into a bass amp, if you're running it for bass guitar as opposed to guitar, if you're running it as a studio tool to, dial in specific frequencies for microphones, for drums. You just don't know. The cool thing, one of the cool things I think about this pedal is that it has a ton of versatility. Like, again, not trying to be overly redundant, but the reality of the situation is that's part of the reason why I was so intrigued by this pedal, other than the fact that third time's the charm, and this is the third pedal build. The second one, technically, I didn't even get a chance to build. It just got packed up and put in storage. So I still have another one of these somewhere. I just have to find it, and then I'll build it. Yay. Knowing what I know from this pedal, you really, 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 really want to take your time and triple check and then quadruple check and test as you go. And I cannot stress this enough. Take your time and triple check your work. Excellent example. I got all this together and got it all. I followed the instructions, got it all put together. Couldn't get it to light up. Couldn't get the LEDs, the indicators, the bypass indicators and all that. I could not get them to fire up. Troubleshot, took it apart, put it back together, got them to light up. And I thought, oh, this is great. And then I ended the video and said I was getting ready for audio. And then I go to start the session, plug it in, and I've got no signal going through from my guitar through the pedal. It lights up, but there's no signal. Okay, well, I ran out of time. I thought about it long and hard and went through the instructions again and just, what could it possibly be? Well, in this case, like I stated in the video, the input jack and output jack, one of the legs that aren't soldered, deliberately aren't soldered, were touching to a place on this printed circuit board that was soldered, and it completed a circuit, and it was grounding out, so it didn't work. Okay, so bent those, great, everything lit up, awesome, but the sound, that's where I'm talking about. That point, there's no sound going through it. So this is the next day. I completely took it apart, and it broke my heart that I had to take everything apart. You've got 2, 4, 6, 8 potentiometers, 5 toggle switches, and 2 engagement switches, 2 bypass foot switches, plus the screws. Then you have to work everything out. Plus the input and output jack. Plus you have to unsolder the power plug to be able to remove it from the chassis, to be able to remove the printed circuit board. So a lot of work to take it out. Then I went through it with a fine-tooth comb, and I left everything except the power soldered together. And once I got everything out of the board, I soldered the power barrel back into the circuit so that I could test it every step of the way. Sure enough, there ended up being 3 issues that were all creating a problem. And it was something so minute and simple, but it just happened to be exactly the thing. Certain wires, the actual wires that you have, that in the instructions, it tells you that you're supposed to solder them in after you've got the printed circuit board into the chassis. Well, sure enough, I had too much lead on those wires. And so when it went through the circuit board and it got soldered and everything was accurate, there are 2 potentiometers that were in this kit. And if I'm not mistaken, it is the presence and the drive. Yeah, the presence and the drive didn't have any protection on the back of the potentiometers. So they are bare metal. And the wires were, once everything was cinched into the case, the wires were actually touching on the presence and the drive. And that is the input and output wires were touching to the presence and the drive, just because there's so little space inside of this box. I mean, it is insanely crowded. So, I got in there, moved the potentiometers while they were still soldered, clipped the leads, and then put painter's tape on the backside of the potentiometers so that if they were to touch anything again, they would not ground out. And lo and behold, plugged everything in, it worked. Okay, so started putting the printed circuit board back into the chassis and putting the, the washers and nuts back on to lock the board into place while the input jack and output jack were still out. The foot switches were still out. Powered it up, got signal, awesome, and it actually got signal. So put the input jack, output jack, and foot switches back in. Power was still out. Powered it up. That worked. So then unsoldered the power, put the power barrel into the chassis, wired the power back up. It worked. Still had the same signal. Put the back plate on. And before putting the screws into the back plate, just pushed it down and double checked. Or in this case, it was like the 8th check. And I still had signal. And so then, and only then, I put the 4 screws in and put all of the actual indicator knobs back on, the control knobs back onto the pedal. I've literally never once had to do anything like that with any pedal build that I have made in the past. Period. End of story. Not once. And I mean not fucking once. It is a pain in the ass. It is disheartening. It is concerning. It's stress-inducing. But the beauty of the situation is I was able to figure it out. It was an opportunity to learn new things that I've never had to deal with before. And it gave me a new perspective of things to look out for in the future, to triple check, and a process of testing everything before putting it in the case and then testing everything after I've put it in the case. There's a reason. I mean, all of these reasons combined are exactly why this pedal specifically has been dubbed the pretty little dumpster fire. But I'm happy to say that the tones are awesome. I don't see how I could not possibly just use this pedal and be able to run any scenario and cut through any mix in a recording or in a live situation, whether it's in an amplifier, solid state, or tube, doesn't matter. Whether it's emulated amplifiers, whether it's, just going and taking this and putting it into a cabinet simulator, that will work. Like it sounds great, and I'm excited. And just beware. I highly implore you, just do yourself the favor, because otherwise it's just blah. All right, until next time, I have been your troubleshooting host, Spuds. And thank you again for tuning in. Like, subscribe, share, all the good goods. And until next video, thank you guys.